8-year-old boy brings black bag to hospital. When they open it, they're shocked. The bare feet of little Ethan left damp footprints on the cold floor of Mercy General Hospital in Portland. At just 3 years old, the boy struggled to drag a black trash bag that seemed heavier than he was. "Help! Please, somebody!" the little one cried in his tiny voice, making several people turn around. "I need help." The receptionist, Dorothy, a 58-year-old woman who had worked there for 2 decades, stood up immediately upon seeing the child alone. The boy wore a faded blue t-shirt and gray shorts. His curly brown hair was messy, and his angelic face was flushed from the effort. "My God, sweetheart, what are you doing here alone?" Dorothy hurried around the counter. "Auntie, you gotta open it." Ethan dropped the bag and pointed with his trembling little finger. "Hurry!" Jennifer, a nurse with 30 years of experience, rushed over when she heard the commotion. Her heart clenched at the sight of such a small, desperate child. Something about the scene made her blood run cold. "Calm down, sweetie. What's inside?" Jennifer crouched to his level. "Open it, open it." Ethan started crying, tugging at the nurse's sleeve. Dr. Richard Thompson, the head of the emergency room, was alerted by the disturbance. When he reached the lobby, he saw the little boy, surrounded by staff, all staring apprehensively at the black bag. "What's going on here?" His authoritative voice made everyone step back slightly. "Doctor, this boy came in alone dragging this bag," Dorothy explained nervously. Richard studied the child. There was something off about the whole scene. Boy so young, alone in a hospital with a trash bag. His years of experience told him something serious was happening. "Son, what's your name?" Richard knelt down. "Ethan." "Open the bag, mister, please." The doctor exchanged glances with Jennifer. Both knew they had to proceed carefully. Gently, Richard began opening the bag while Ethan watched anxiously, his tiny hands clasped together. When the contents were revealed, silence fell over the room. Dorothy covered her mouth, Jennifer's eyes widened, and Richard needed a few seconds to process what he was seeing. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot, as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. Inside the bag were dozens of empty medicine bottles, crumpled prescriptions, lab reports, and an ID card. Richard picked up the document with shaky hands. The photo showed a young woman, Ashley Wilson, age 28. "Is this your mommy?" Richard showed the photo to Ethan. The boy nodded vigorously, tears streaming down his chubby cheeks. "Mommy's sick. She won't wake up." The doctor felt his blood run cold. He quickly scanned the prescriptions and medicine bottles, all controlled. Substances, antidepressants, anti-anxiety meds. The dates showed they were recent from different doctors. "Jennifer, call an ambulance now. Dorothy, stay with the boy." Richard was already grabbing his phone. "We need this child's address. Immediately!" Ethan, sensing the urgency, began crying louder. Dorothy hugged him, trying to soothe him, but the little one squirmed. "I want my mommy. She promised she'd wake up." "Where do you live, sweetheart?" Dorothy kept her voice steady. "Yellow House, near Mrs. Johnson's Market." Richard called emergency services while trying to gather more details. Every second counted. If the mother had taken all those pills, the hospital entrance turned into organized chaos. Paramedics were dispatched, social workers called, and a police car was sent to help locate the address. Half an hour later, which felt like an eternity, Richard's phone rang. It was the ambulance team. "Doctor, we found the woman. She's still alive but in critical condition. We're on our way." The relief was palpable, but the situation remained dire. Ethan, exhausted from crying, had fallen asleep in Dorothy's arms as she gently rocked him on the reception area couch. When the ambulance arrived with Ashley, the medical team was already prepared. The young mother was unconscious, but her vital signs, though weak, were still holding. "Intubate her. Emergency gastric lavage," Richard commanded the team. In the hours that followed, the entire hospital mobilized to save Ashley. Nurses took turns caring for Ethan, who woke up frightened, calling for his mother. Dorothy never left his side, not even for a minute. Then a discovery changed everything. While examining the bag's contents more carefully, Jennifer found something that had gone unnoticed. A pink notebook hidden among the papers. It was a diary. The pages told a story of pain and despair. Ashley had lost her husband, Michael, in a workplace accident 8 months earlier. Since then, she had been battling depression while trying to raise Ethan alone. "I can't take the pain anymore," read one of the last entries. "Ethan deserves a better mother. Maybe he'll be better off without me." Jennifer felt tears streaming down her face. As a mother herself, she couldn't fathom that woman's despair. She kept reading and learned that Ashley had recently lost her job, was about to be evicted, and had no close family. But one specific entry caught her attention. "Ethan saved me today. When I thought about giving up, he hugged me and said, 'Mommy is the best in the world. How could I ever leave him?'" The nurse rushed to share the discovery with Richard. After reading the diary, the doctor made a decision. "We're saving this woman, and then we'll make sure she and her son get all the help they need." Word of the situation spread through the hospital. Staff began organizing. The cafeteria worker, Mrs. Jenkins, prepared a special snack for Ethan. The security guard, Mr. Roberts, went to a nearby store to buy clean clothes for the boy. But it was when Ethan woke up that something extraordinary happened. Seeing all these people caring for him, the little boy smiled for the first time. "Are you going to help my mommy?" "We sure are, sweetheart." Dorothy hugged him. "Your mummy's going to be okay. I brought her medicine. She said if I brought it to the hospital, the doctors would know how to help." Richard, who was passing by, stopped when he heard this. "So how do you mean, son? Your mom asked you to bring it?" Ethan nodded, rubbing his little eyes. "She said, 'Ethan, if mommy sleeps and doesn't wake up, you take this bag to the hospital. They'll know what to do.'" The doctor felt a lump in his throat. Even in her darkest moment, Ashley had thought of protecting her son. She had prepared everything so that if something happened, the doctors would know exactly what she had taken. The hours dragged on. The medical team fought to stabilize Ashley. Ethan, now clean and fed, played with some toys the staff had improvised, but his little eyes kept searching for news of his mother. Then Jennifer made another discovery in the diary. An envelope was tucked into the last page. Inside, a letter addressed to Ethan. "My beloved son, if you're reading this, or someone is reading it to you, it means mommy needed to go rest, but I want you to know you're the best thing that ever happened to me." Jennifer couldn't keep reading. Tears blurred her vision. She put the letter away. If God willed it, Ashley herself would read it to her son one day. The sun was beginning to set when Richard came out of the ICU. His tired face showed signs of hope. "She's responding to treatment. It's too early to celebrate, but the signs are positive." Dorothy, who hadn't let go of Ethan, sighed in relief. The boy, half asleep, asked, "Is mommy gonna wake up?" "Yes, sweetheart. But she needs lots of rest first." That night, something magical happened at Mercy General Hospital. Ethan's story had touched every staff member. A social worker, Sarah, who was on duty, began making calls. "We need to help this family," she said. "We can't save her today just to let her go back to the same situation tomorrow." Within hours, a network of kindness formed. The owner of the grocery store where Ashley shopped, Mr. Thompson, offered a monthly food basket. The director of the city daycare guaranteed a full-time spot for Ethan. A volunteer psychologist offered to support Ashley. But the biggest surprise came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Sullivan, a 72-year-old woman visiting her hospitalized husband, overheard the story and approached Dorothy. "This young woman, did she lose her husband in a work accident?" Dorothy nodded, watching the older woman's eyes fill with tears. My son was Michael, her husband." The silence that followed was broken only by Ethan's soft breathing as he slept in Dorothy's arms. Mrs. Sullivan stepped closer, gazing at the grandson she'd never known. We fought when Michael got married. We didn't approve such foolish pride. We never met our grandson." The revelation added a new layer to the story. Gently, Dorothy let Mrs. Sullivan hold Ethan. The elderly woman wept silently as she embraced her grandson for the first time. The next morning, Ashley showed significant improvement. Weak but alert, she was gradually told everything that had happened. "Ethan, where's Ethan?" were her first words. "He's okay. "He was so brave, he saved your life," Richard explained. When she finally saw her son, Ashley broke down. Ethan rushed into his mother's arms, and they clung to each other as if the world depended on that hug. "I'm sorry, baby. Mommy was really sick." "It's okay, Mommy. The hospital aunties and uncles helped." Then Mrs. Sullivan entered the room, accompanied by her husband, Mr. Sullivan. Ashley recognized them immediately and tensed. "Ashley," Mrs. Sullivan began, her voice trembling, "can we talk?" What followed was one of the most moving moments the hospital had ever witnessed. Grandparents and granddaughter reconciled. Tears flowed. Forgiveness was asked and given. Ethan, not fully understanding but sensing the love in the air, hugged everyone. "Are these Daddy's mommy and daddy?" he asked innocently. "Yes. Sweetheart, they're your grandparents." Ashley's recovery wasn't easy. Depression doesn't vanish overnight. But now she wasn't alone. She had her in-laws' support. They'd moved closer. She had therapy. She had a support network the hospital helped build. Dorothy, who'd grown deeply attached to Ethan, became like an aunt. She visited regularly, and the boy always ran to hug her. Jennifer organized a support group for mothers in similar situations at the hospital. Ashley's diary, with her permission, became a tool to help other women recognize warning signs. Richard implemented a special hospital protocol for similar cases, ensuring immediate psychosocial support for families in crisis. But the most significant change came 6 months later. Ashley, now working part-time at Dorothy's shop, arrived at the hospital carrying not a black bag, but a colorful box. "I came to thank you," she said, gathering everyone who'd helped. Inside were Ethan's drawings, thank you cards, and photos of their reunited family. The boy, now older and more talkative, was giving out hugs to everyone. "Look, Aunt Dorothy, I drew you," he said proudly. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us so much as we're just starting out. Now continuing, a year had passed since that fateful day. Ashley was in Mrs. Sullivan's kitchen helping prepare Sunday lunch. The house, once silent, now buzzed with Ethan's laughter and lively conversations. "You know," Ashley said to her mother-in-law, "sometimes I think about that day. If it weren't for Ethan—" "Don't dwell on that," Mrs. Sullivan gently interrupted. "Just remember that God used a little 3-year-old angel to save not just you, but our whole family." It was true. Tragedy had turned into rebuilding. The walls Pride had built were torn down by a child's love. Ethan, now 4, ran into the kitchen. "Grandma, Mommy, Grandpa said he's going to teach me how to play soccer." The two women smiled. George, once a stern and distant man, had become the most doting grandfather in the world. But not everything was perfect. Ashley still had her hard days. Days when she missed Michael so much she could barely breathe. Days when depression tried, creeping back in. One such day, something unexpected happened. Ashley was in her room, crying silently, when Ethan walked in. Without a word, the boy climbed onto the bed and hugged her. "Mommy sad because of Daddy?" Ashley nodded, unable to speak. "Daddy lives here." Ethan placed his little hand on his own chest. "And here," he placed it on his mother's. He didn't really go away. The child's wisdom, in its simplicity, touched Ashley deeply. She hugged her son, realizing Michael lived on through this special boy. At Mercy General Hospital, Ethan's story had become something of a legend. New staff heard about the 3-year-old who saved his mother and how it transformed the hospital's approach to family crises. Dorothy, now the front desk supervisor, had implemented special training to spot warning signs in children arriving, alone or in unusual situations. "Never underestimate a child," she'd say in her talks. "Ethan taught me that the smallest gestures can save lives." 2 years later, on a sunny afternoon, Ashley was at the park with Ethan when her phone rang. It was Jennifer from the hospital. "Ashley, we have a situation here. A young mother going through something very similar to what you experienced. Would you be able to—" Without hesitation, Ashley replied, "I'm on my way." And so began Ashley's volunteer work at the hospital. She became a kind of guardian angel for mothers in crisis, someone who understood their pain because she'd lived it. During one visit, she met Rachel, a 25-year-old single mother of 2-year-old twins. The young woman had been found unconscious. At home by neighbors, empty pill bottles beside her. "I can't take it anymore," Rachel sobbed. "It's too hard. I just wanted to rest." Ashley held her hands firmly. "I understand, believe me, I know this pain in every fiber of my being. But let me tell you a story about a 3-year-old boy and a black bag." As Ashley shared her story, she saw Rachel's eyes fill with tears, but also with something more: hope. "Your children need you. Not the perfect mother, but the mother who fights, who falls and gets back up." Ashley stayed close through Rachel's recovery. The two became friends, their children playmates. Ethan, now 5, had developed a special sensitivity. Whenever he saw someone sad, he'd approach in his own sweet way. "Want a hug?" Mommy says. Hugs heal heartaches. At a family gathering, George made an announcement that surprised everyone. "Dorothy and I have been thinking, we want to create a foundation in memory of Michael, to help families like ours who were torn apart by tragedy and need to find their way back together." Ashley felt her eyes well up. The pain of losing Michael would never completely fade, but now it would be transformed into something greater. "But we don't want just any foundation," Dorothy added. "We want something that really works, that reaches people before it's too late." And so the Ethan Foundation was born. The name, chosen unanimously, honored the little hero who had brought the family together. The foundation would partner with hospitals, schools, and community centers to identify families in emotional distress and offer support before crisis struck. Richard, the doctor who had treated Ethan that day, became a volunteer medical consultant. Dorothy left her job at the hospital to coordinate the efforts. Jennifer trained volunteers to recognize warning signs. The foundation's opening was an emotional event. Ethan, wearing a little suit Dorothy had bought especially for the occasion, cut the ribbon with his small hands. "I helped pick the colors," he proudly announced to anyone who would listen. The walls were painted a soft yellow with drawings of suns and rainbows. There were counseling rooms, spaces for support groups, and a play area where children could stay while their parents received help. In its first month, the foundation helped 50 families. Stories of pain, but also of resilience, filled the once empty halls. Amanda Peterson, one of the first to receive support, was referred by her son's school. "The teacher noticed my son was different, quieter. She said you could help." During sessions, it became clear Amanda had been suffering silently after losing a baby. The unprocessed grief was affecting the whole family. "I thought I had to be strong," she confessed, "that I couldn't show weakness." The counseling, support groups, and above all, the judgment-free care made the difference. 3 months later, Amanda was smiling again. "You gave me back my life," she told Ashley. "It wasn't us," Ashley replied. "You chose to fight. We just showed you weren't alone." Ethan grew up closely involved with the foundation that bore his name. By 6, he already had his own ideas. "Mommy, I think there should be a day just for kids, so they can talk about their OEs too." His suggestion became reality. Kids Talk circles were added to the program, where children could express their feelings through drawings, play, and age-appropriate conversations. It was during one of these circles that they met Tommy, a 7-year-old who had stopped speaking after witnessing his mother have a severe panic attack. Ethan, with his natural empathy, approached the boy. "You know, when my mommy had OEs, I got scared too, but then I found out hugs help a lot." Slowly, through his friendship with Ethan and professional support, Tommy began speaking again. His first word was friend, directed at Ethan. The foundation's work began attracting local media attention. A special feature told its origin story from the day Ethan dragged the black bag to the hospital. "It's impossible not to be moved," the reporter said. A tragedy turned into hope for hundreds of families. With visibility came more volunteers and donations. Local business owners stepped forward to offer support. The city provided a larger space to expand services. Dorothy, at 74, had found a new purpose in life. She personally coordinated the Grandparents' Coffee Club, weekly meetings where elderly people who had lost contact with their families could share experiences and receive support to attempt reconciliation. "Pride is poison," she always said. It almost cost me the most precious grandson in the world. George, in turn, created a professional mentorship program for single parents, helping them re-enter the job market. Financial hardship amplifies all other pains, he explained. But not everything was an immediate success. There were difficult cases, people who couldn't overcome their struggles despite all the support. Each loss was deeply felt by the team. That was the case with Marcus, a father who had lost custody of his children after a severe depressive episode. Despite months of follow-up, he couldn't recover in time to reverse the court's decision. "We failed him," Ashley cried in Dorothy's arms. "No, dear, we tried. Sometimes, no matter how much we do, we can't save everyone. But we can't give up on those we can still help." Dorothy's wisdom guided the Institute through the tough times. Each lost case became a lesson to better help the next. Ethan, now 7, had become a sort of mascot for the Institute. His story was shared to give hope, and his cheerful presence brightened the halls. One special afternoon, he made an unusual request. "Mommy, I want to throw a party for all the kids at the Institute." "A party? Why, sweetheart?" "Because when we're sad, a party helps us feel happy." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. The Joy Festival became a monthly event at the Institute. Volunteers would decorate the space, bake cakes, and organize games. It was a time when families could simply be happy together without talking about problems or pain. At one of these parties, something happened that would change the course of the story again. Ashley was helping serve cake when she noticed a woman standing at the door, watching everything with tears in her eyes. "Can I help you?" Ashley approached. I read about you in the paper, about the boy, the black bag." The woman, who introduced herself as Dr. Catherine Reynolds, was a psychiatrist who had just lost a young patient to suicide. "I failed him," she sobbed. "I didn't see the signs in time." Ashley hugged her, deeply understanding that guilt. Sometimes we do everything we can, and it's still not enough. But that doesn't mean we should stop trying. Catherine became a volunteer at the Institute, bringing her professional expertise. But more than that, she brought the humility of someone who understands that technical knowledge isn't always enough. "You've taught me something they don't teach in medical school," she said at a meeting. "That sometimes a hug is worth more than 1,000 technical words." The Institute grew but kept its essence: compassionate care, judgment-free support, and the belief that no one is beyond saving. 3 years had passed. Ethan, now 8, was a remarkably articulate and empathetic boy for his age. In a school essay titled "My Hero," he surprised everyone. "My hero is me when I was 3, because I saved my mommy and learned that little kids can do big things." His teacher, moved, shared the essay with Ashley. "Your son has an extraordinary understanding of what he's been through." "He grew up too fast," Ashley replied with a mix of pride and sadness. It was true. Ethan carried a maturity uncommon for his age, yet he still held on to his childlike sweetness and joy. The Institute had become a national model. Delegations from other cities came to learn about the model. Ashley was invited to give talks, always bringing Ethan along. "This is the true hero," she would always say, introducing her son. During one of these trips, they met the Secretary of Health, who was interested in replicating the model across the country. "We need more Ethan Foundations," he declared. The idea of expansion brought new challenges. How could they maintain the essence of personalized care on a large scale? How could they ensure it wouldn't just become another bureaucratic government program? Dorothy, with her practical wisdom, had the answer. Each institute must grow from a real community story. It can't be imposed from the top down. A training program for multipliers was then created. People who had been helped by the Institute were trained to establish support hubs in their own communities. Rachel, the mother Ashley had helped years earlier, was one of the first multipliers. "I want to give back what I received," she said. "I want to be for someone what Ashley was for me." The model spread organically. Each new hub had its own story of resilience as its foundation, but followed the same core principles: welcome, no judgment, and full family support. One of the most touching cases in the new hub, coordinated by Rachel, was Elizabeth, a 68-year-old grandmother who had taken in 3 grandchildren after her daughter developed a substance dependency. "I don't know what to do anymore," she confessed at the first meeting. "I love my grandchildren, but I don't have the energy left." Support came from all directions. Volunteers took turns helping with the children. A pro bono lawyer secured social benefits she hadn't known about. A group of grandparents in similar situations was formed. "I realized I'm not alone," Elizabeth said months later, "and I still have so much to give." Ethan watched everything with interest. At 9 years old, he started his own project. Hope. Letters. Children helped by the Institute wrote letters to other kids in similar situations. "When I was little, I would have liked to know other children went through the same thing and turned out okay," he explained. The project was a success. The letters, written with childlike sincerity, touched hearts deeply. One, written by a 7-year-old girl, said, "Hi friend, I don't know, I know your mum or dad is sick, mine was too. But you know what? They get better, and until then we can be strong for them." Ashley read the letters with tears in her eyes. Her son had turned his pain into purpose, just as she had done. But life still held challenges. During a routine checkup, Ashley received news that shook her. She had a health issue requiring intensive treatment. "Is Mommy going to be sick again?" Ethan asked when he found out. "Just a little, sweetheart, but this time is different. I know. I'm not alone." The news mobilized the entire support network they had built. Dorothy and George took turns caring for Ethan. Dorothy organized a schedule to accompany her to appointments. The Institute continued running under Jennifer's temporary leadership. During treatment, Ashley had plenty of time to reflect. In a letter she wrote to Ethan, in case anything happened, she said, "My beloved son, if you ever read this, I want you to know you saved me not once but 1,000 times. Every smile, every hug, every 'I love you, Mommy' gave me strength to keep going. You taught me love is stronger than any pain." Fortunately, the treatment was successful. Ashley made a full recovery, but the experience gave her a new perspective. "I realized we've built something bigger than ourselves," she said at an Institute meeting. "Something that will continue even when we're no longer here." It was true. The Ethan Foundation had become a movement. It was no longer about one family or one story, but about the fundamental belief that no one should face pain alone. Ethan, now 10 years old, had become a young speaker. He was invited to speak at a conference on children's mental health. "Adults always think kids don't understand," he began, his clear voice echoing through the auditorium. "But we do. We understand when you're sad, when you're scared, and we want to help." He told his story in his own unique way, focusing not on the drama but on hope. "I was 3 years old when I saved my mum. Imagine what kids who are 10, 12, or 15 can do if we give them the chance." The auditorium erupted in applause. Proposals for public policies involving children in family mental health programs began to be discussed. Dorothy, watching from the audience, felt her chest swell with pride. The great-grandson she had barely known was changing the world, one word at a time. The 10th anniversary of the foundation was celebrated with a big party. Hundreds of families who had been helped attended. The walls were covered with photos and testimonials. Ashley took the stage, Ethan by her side. Now a 13-year-old teenager taller than his mother. 10 years ago, I was in the darkest place anyone could be, she began. Today, I'm here, alive, whole, surrounded by love. And all thanks to a brave 3-year-old boy. Ethan, a little embarrassed by the attention, hugged his mother. I just did what any kid would do, Mom. I tried to help. And that's the secret, Ashley continued. We can all help. We don't have to be heroes. We just have to care. Richard, the doctor who had treated Ethan 10 years earlier and was now the foundation's medical director, also spoke. That day changed how I see medicine. I learned that saving lives goes far beyond the physical body. Dorothy, Jennifer, and everyone who had been there that fateful day shared their memories. Each of them had been transformed by the experience, but the surprise of the evening came. From Ethan, he had prepared a special announcement. "I have something to say," he said, a little nervous. "I've decided what I want to be when I grow up." Everyone expected him to say doctor, psychologist, or social worker, but Ethan surprised them. "I want to be a teacher, because it was a teacher who noticed my mom needed help. I want to be someone who sees when kids are in need." Ashley couldn't hold back her tears. Her son had understood something fundamental. Prevention is just as important as treatment. The foundation then launched the Watchful School program, training teachers to identify signs of family struggles through children's behavior. The first school to implement the program identified 15 families needing support in the first month, none in critical situations yet, but all benefiting from early intervention. "That's it," Ethan cheered when he heard the results. "If we help before things get really bad, fewer kids will have to do what I did." 2 years later, Ethan, now 15, was invited to speak at the UN about suicide prevention and family mental health. "My story started with a black bag and despair," he told delegates from around the world. "But it doesn't have to be that way. We can create support networks that identify and help families before they reach the breaking point." His speech was met with a standing ovation. Proposals to implement the Ethan model in other countries began to emerge. Ashley, watching from the gallery, could hardly believe how far they had come, from the deepest darkness to the light now shining on lives across the world. Dorothy, now 82 and still active in the foundation, whispered, "Michael would be so proud." And it was true. Ethan's legacy lived not only in Michael, but in every life saved, every family reunited, every child who wouldn't have to carry a black bag to a hospital. The foundation had helped over 10,000 families over the years. There were 50 centers across the United States and pilot programs in 5 other countries. But for Ashley, the most important number was 1, a 3-year-old boy who chose to act when he could have been paralyzed by fear. On a quiet afternoon, Ashley and Ethan visited the hospital where it all began. Dorothy, now retired but still volunteering, greeted them with her usual hug. "Look how tall you've gotten," she said to Ethan, having to look up now. They walked through the lobby, now renovated but still familiar. "It was right here," Ethan pointed to the exact spot. "I was so tired of dragging that bag." "And this is where you saved my life," Ashley finished. They stood in silence for a moment, each lost in their memories. "Mom," Ethan broke the silence, "have you ever thought about what would have happened if I hadn't made it to the hospital?" "Every day, son. And every day, I thank God you were so brave." "I didn't feel brave," Ethan admitted. "I was really scared. But the fear of losing you was worse." They hugged right there in the middle of the busy hospital, 2 survivors of a story that could have ended tragically, but instead became hope for thousands. Ashley's phone rang. It was Rachel from the center she coordinated. "Ashley, we have an emergency. A 4-year-old just arrived saying her mum won't wake up." "We're on our way," Ashley answered without hesitation. As they rushed to the car, Ethan said, "It's like a cycle, isn't it, Mum? There's always someone who needs help." "Yes, son, but now they're not alone. Now there's a place to go, people who understand, who don't judge, who help." They reached the center in 20 minutes. The scene was painfully familiar. A small, frightened child surrounded by worried adults. Ethan carefully approached the little girl. "Hi, my name's Ethan. What's yours?" "Sophie," she answered between sobs. "Sophie, you were so brave to come get help. Now the grown-ups will take care of your mom, okay?" While the medical team was called, Ethan stayed with Sophie, telling stories, drawing pictures, being the support he wished he'd had. Sophie's mother, Jessica, was found in time. Just like Ashley years before, she had overdosed on medication, but quick action saved her life. During Jessica's recovery, Ashley personally supported her. The story repeated itself, but now with an established support network. "I thought no one would notice if I disappeared," Jessica confessed. "Your daughter would, and she did. Children always notice. They love us even when we can't love ourselves." Sophie and Ethan became friends. He was the mentor who understood exactly what she'd been through. She was proof that the cycle of rescue continued. Sophie's case brought new urgency to their work. If a 4-year-old could ask for help, How many others were in similar situations without knowing what to do? A national campaign was launched. Children Save Lives Too. Booklets were distributed in schools, playfully teaching kids what to do if mom or dad were very sick. The campaign was controversial. Some argued it placed too much responsibility on children. Others, including Ethan, insisted it gave them tools to act in emergencies. No one's saying kids should take care of their parents, Ethan explained in a debate. But if it happens, it's better they know how to ask for help than freeze in fear. The results spoke for themselves. In the first year of the campaign, there was a 70% increase in children seeking help for parents in crisis. Lives were saved. Catherine, the psychiatrist who had joined the foundation after losing a patient, developed a specific protocol to care for these young heroes. They carry an enormous burden, she explained. They save their parents but often feel guilty for reporting the problem. The psychological support for the children became just as important as the treatment for the parents. Support groups were created where kids who had gone through the experience could share their feelings. Ethan, still a teenager, participated regularly, becoming a role model. "You're all superheroes," he'd say. "I know because I was one too." Ashley watched her son with pride and a touch of sadness. He had lost part of his innocence far too young, but had turned that loss into purpose. At 16, Ethan created an app, Hope Network. With one tap, children could call for help, send their location, or even connect with others who had faced similar situations. The app went viral. Within 6 months, it had 100,000 downloads. Partnerships with child protection agencies ensured quick responses to calls. "It's technology serving life," Ethan explained in an interview. "If kids have smartphones earlier and earlier, let's use that to protect them." But not everything was about technology. The heart of the foundation remained human connection, the embrace, the presence. Mrs. Jenkins, the hospital cafeteria, worker who had made Ethan's lunch on that first day and was now a foundation volunteer at 71, put it simply, "Computers are good, but nothing replaces a comforting hug when you're hurting." And she was right. No matter how much technology helped identify and connect people in need, healing came from human encounters. Dorothy, now requiring special care due to her age, still insisted on participating in the foundation's activities. "This place keeps me alive," she'd say. "Every reunited family, every smiling child reminds me why it's worth carrying on." George had passed 2 years earlier, but his legacy lived on in the professional mentorship programs he had created. Hundreds of parents had found new jobs, breaking the cycle of financial despair that worsened emotional struggles. One special afternoon, the foundation received an unexpected visitor. Charles Edward, a successful businessman, arrived asking to speak with Ashley. 20 years ago, my mother tried to," he began, his voice breaking. "A neighbor took me to the hospital. I was 5. I've never forgotten the fear." He had read about the foundation and wanted to make a substantial donation. "But I don't just want to give money," he explained. "I want to create scholarships for children who saved their parents. They deserve opportunities." And so, the Hope Future program was born. Ethan became the first mentor, helping select recipients and guiding their progress. "It's not a reward for saving their parents," he always clarified. "It's recognizing that they're extraordinary kids who deserve extraordinary opportunities." Sophie, now 8, was one of the first scholarship recipients. Bright and determined, she dreamed of becoming a doctor. "I want to save people like the doctors saved my mom," she said. Jessica, fully recovered and working as an administrative assistant at the foundation, supported her daughter's dreams. "She saved me once. Now I'll make sure she gets every chance to save others." The foundation's work had created a true network of transformation. Every person helped became a multiplier of hope. But Ethan, now about to turn 18, faced his own struggles. The pressure of being the boy who saved his mother weighed on him at times. "Mom," he confessed one night, "sometimes I wish I could just be normal, not have this story." Ashley hugged him, understanding perfectly. "I'm so sorry you went through that so young. If I could turn back time—" "No," Ethan interrupted. "I wouldn't change a thing. It's just heavy sometimes." They talked at length about the weight of expectations. about Ethan's right to choose his own path, to not feel obligated to dedicate his whole life to the cause. "You've already done more than anyone could ask," Ashley said. "If you want to take a different path, you have my full support." Ethan smiled, relieved to have permission to just be himself. At his high school graduation, Ethan was the class speaker. His speech surprised everyone. "I've spent my life being known as the Black Bag Boy, and for a long time I thought that was my only identity. But I've learned we're so much more than our moments of crisis. We're also our dreams, our joys, our daily choices." He announced he'd been accepted into a teaching program, keeping his dream of becoming a teacher, but also that he'd take a gap year to travel and see the world beyond hospitals and institutes. "I need to discover who Ethan is, beyond the story," he explained. Ashley, tears of pride streaming down her face, stood and applauded. Her son had learned the most important lesson, to take care of himself too. Ethan's trip was transformative. He visited social projects in several countries, but also hiked, discovered beaches, and made friends who knew nothing about his past. He sent photos and messages regularly. In one from Thailand, he wrote, "Mom, today I helped a lost family find their way. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I think that's it, helping by choice, not duty." Ashley smiled as she read it. Her son had found balance. During Ethan's absence, the Institute continued to grow. A documentary about the story was produced, reaching millions. The impact went beyond expectations. Letters arrived from all over the country, people sharing their own stories of overcoming, inspired by his example. One touched Ashley deeply. It was from Anthony, 45, who had been saved by his 6-year-old daughter 20 years earlier. "I never had the courage to talk about it. I carried so much shame. But seeing your story made me realize there's no shame in needing help. My daughter is a doctor now. She saved my life and then chose to save others." Ashley shared the letter with Ethan, who was in New Zealand. "See, Mum, our story gave others permission to tell theirs. It's a cycle of healing." When Ethan returned a year later, he was changed, more mature, lighter, more whole. "I learned I can be Ethan, the one who saved his mum, but also Ethan who loves music. Who's a terrible cook, who's afraid of heights," he laughed. He resumed his teaching studies with renewed enthusiasm, but also got involved in other things. He joined a band, started rock climbing, facing his fear of heights, and volunteered teaching refugee children. The Institute, now under the shared leadership of Ashley, Jennifer, and Rachel, continued its mission. New programs were constantly developed. One of the most innovative was Extended Family, connecting lonely individuals with families willing to informally adopt them. Many crises stemmed from social isolation. Elizabeth, the grandmother raising her 3 grandchildren, was one of the first to benefit. A young family adopted her, including her and the kids in Sunday lunches, outings, and celebrations. "I gained extra children and grandchildren," she said tearfully. "We're not alone anymore." Dorothy, at 87, still sharp, but physically frail, spent her days at the Institute, becoming a kind of universal grandmother. "Every child I hug brings a little piece of Michael back to me," she confided to Ashley. On a special afternoon, the foundation received an international delegation. The model had been chosen by the World Health Organization as an example of best practices in prevention and community mental health. Ethan, invited to present its history, began in an unusual way. "Let me tell you a story. Once upon a time, there was a 3-year-old boy, barefoot and frightened, dragging a black bag bigger than himself." As he spoke, the international audience was moved. But Ethan didn't stop at the dramatic part. That boy grew up. Sometimes he wonders if he did the right thing, if it wasn't too much responsibility for someone so young. But then he sees the thousands of lives transformed and understands there's no age limit for love to act. The model was approved for implementation in 30 countries. Each would adapt it to their cultural reality while preserving its core principles. 20 years had passed since that day at the hospital. Ethan, now 23, and with a degree in education, began his work as a teacher at a public school on the outskirts of town. On his first day, he observed his students carefully. Years of experience had taught him to recognize the signs. Say, a boy in the back, too quiet. A girl who hadn't brought lunch. Another who dozed off, likely not sleeping well at home. Good morning, class. My name is Mr. Ethan. Before we start with math, I want you to know, this classroom is a safe place. If you need to talk about anything, I'm here. The students looked at him curiously. It wasn't the usual way class began. Ethan smiled and started an activity where each child could share something about themselves if they wanted. Gradually, voices rose and stories were told. At recess, the quiet boy approached. Mr. Ethan, can I tell you a secret? Of course, you can. My mom, she cries every night. I don't know what to do. Ethan's heart tightened. The story repeated itself, always repeating. But now there were paths forward. You were very brave to tell me. How about I talk to your mom? I can introduce her to people who can help. The boy nodded, relieved to share the burden. That afternoon, Ethan visited the family. The mother, Christine, worked 2 jobs to support her 3 children after her husband abandoned them. Exhaustion was written on her face. You don't have to be ashamed of needing help, Ethan said gently. I know a place that can welcome you and your family. He took Christine to the foundation. 20 years later, the care remained the same, free of judgment, filled with hope. Ashley, now the executive director, personally welcomed Christine. The cycle continued. 6 months later, Christine was stable. She had secured a better job through the foundation's training program, her children received tutoring, and she regularly attended support groups. You saved my life, she said at the foundation's year-end celebration. No, Ashley corrected softly. Your son saved your life by recognizing you needed help. We just provided the tools. Ethan watched from a distance, proud. Every child he identified and helped was a victory. They no longer had to drag black bags to hospitals. There was a network ready to support them. Dorothy passed away on a spring morning at 89. Her last words to Ethan were, "Take care of the children, all of them." The funeral was a celebration of life. Hundreds of people whose lives she had touched attended. The foundation declared a period of mourning, but Dorothy had left clear instructions. No prolonged sadness. Every tear must turn into action. In her honor, Grandma Dorothy's garden was created at the foundation, a place where children could play and elders could rest, embodying her belief in the bond between generations. Ethan, dealing with the grief of losing his great-grandmother, who had become his greatest supporter, channeled his pain into his work. He developed a special curriculum on emotional intelligence for his classes. Children need to learn about feelings just as much as they learn about math, he argued during faculty meetings. Initially there was resistance, but the results spoke for themselves. Ethan's students showed greater empathy, better communication skills, and ironically improved academic performance too. Children who understand their emotions learn better, he explained. The program was adopted by the Municipal Education Office and later by the state. Another seed planted by the Black Bag Boy was blossoming into collective hope. At 25, Ethan married Emma, a psychologist he met during a training session at the Institute. The simple ceremony brought together the large extended family they had built over the years. Ashley, in her mother of the groom speech, said, 22 years ago, I thought I had lost everything. Today, I see my son getting married, surrounded by hundreds of people who are family not by blood but by choice. Love multiplied where pain tried to destroy. Sophie, now 15 and determined to study medicine, was one of the bridesmaids. Jessica, her mother, cried with joy seeing her daughter healthy and happy. If someone had told me on that terrible day that we'd be here today, she whispered to Ashley. I know, Ashley squeezed her hand. The future always holds better surprises than despair makes us believe. The celebration lasted late into the night. It wasn't just a wedding, it was a celebration of lives intertwined through resilience. A year later, Emma became pregnant. The news brought joy, but also deep reflection for Ethan. Will I be able to protect my child from trauma? He confided in Ashley. We can't protect them from everything, she replied with hard-earned wisdom, but we can teach them that there's always hope, always help, always a way. Michael Ethan was born on a sunny morning. When Ashley held her grandson for the first time, the tears came unbidden. "Your grandpa Michael would be so proud," she whispered. The baby, unaware of the weight of family history, slept peacefully. A new generation had begun, carrying the legacy but not the trauma. The Institute, now an international reference, welcomed visitors from around the world. The Ethan model, as it became known academically, was studied in universities, implemented in public policies, and replicated in different contexts. But at its core remained the same simplicity: a child who saw his mother in danger and acted. Ethan kept a tradition. Every year on the anniversary of that fateful day, he visited the hospital with a bag, not black, but colorful, filled with toys for the young patients. To turn difficult memories into acts of love, he explained. The veteran nurses, many of whom had been there on the original day, greeted him with emotional hugs. "Seeing you grow into who you've become is proof that our work matters," Dorothy, now 80 but still volunteering, always said. On one of these visits, Ethan found a 4-year-old girl in the lobby, crying alone. "Hi, why are you sad?" He crouched down. "My grandma is sick. She fell and won't wake up." Ethan felt the déjà vu, but now he had the tools to help. He called the staff, made sure the girl's grandmother received care, and stayed with the child. "You know, when I was little like you, I was also really scared in a hospital," he shared. The girl looked at him with wide eyes. "What happened?" "The doctors and nurses helped, and everything turned out okay, just like it will for your grandma." And it did. The woman had suffered a mild stroke, but made a full recovery. The grateful family wanted to know more about the kind teacher who had comforted their granddaughter. When they heard the story, the emotion was overwhelming. "It's like a guardian angel," the girl's mother said. "Someone who understands fear because they've lived through it." The foundation then launched the Welcoming Angels program. People who had experienced childhood hospital trauma were trained to comfort children in similar situations. The little girl from the hospital, Lily, became a frequent visitor at the foundation, joining in children's activities. Her experience, transformed into art therapy, helped other children process their fears. Ashley, watching the work grow, organically marveled at life's twists. Every pain turned into purpose, she reflected. Every trauma transformed into compassion. The documentary about the foundation won international awards, but the most touching moment was when they screened it for the families they had helped. Seeing their story on screen, realizing the impact they'd made was life-changing for many. "I thought I was just another failed mother," said one of them. "Now I see I was part of something bigger." Ethan, now the educational director of a school network implementing emotional education, balanced professional responsibilities with family life. Michael Ethan, his son, grew up surrounded by love, but also social awareness. At 3 years old, the same age Ethan had been on that fateful day, he already showed unusual empathy. "Daddy, why is that boy sad?" he'd ask at the park. "I don't know, son, but we can ask if he wants to play with us." Sensitivity passed down naturally without weight, simply as a way of being in the world. Emma, working at the foundation, as the children's mental health coordinator, developed age-specific protocols. "Each stage of development has its own needs," she explained. "A teenager doesn't process trauma like a 3-year-old. Her work revolutionized care, making it even more effective." 30 years after the original event, the foundation prepared a special celebration. They tried to measure their impact. Over 100,000 families directly helped. Millions more touched indirectly through replicated programs. But numbers couldn't capture the essence. Every life saved had a name, a story, dreams preserved. Ethan, now 33, was invited to give the keynote speech. On stage before thousands, he began, "30 years ago, I was just a frightened child. Today, I'm a father, an educator, a citizen. Between those two moments, thousands of you entered my story and turned it into our story." He paused, looking at Ashley in the front row, her hair now gray but her smile still radiant. "My mother taught me that from the deepest pain can come the highest purpose, that no night is so dark it can't be brightened by acts of love." He shared stories of transformation, named names, celebrated small and large victories. But it was his closing words that stayed in their hearts. If a 3-year-old can change the world by dragging a black bag, imagine what each of us can do with the tools we have today. Don't wait. Act. Love has no minimum age. The ovation was long and emotional, but the most moving moment came afterward, when dozens of black bag children, as those who had saved their parents now called themselves, took the stage. Different ages, different stories, but united by early courage. Sophie was among them, now a doctor. Lily, the grandmother's girl, studying psychology. So many others, each on their own path but carrying the mark of compassion. Ashley stepped onto the stage and embraced each one. Her voice, choked but steady, rang out, "You are living proof that love wins. It always wins." The event ended with the launch of an ambitious goal: to create a global network where no child would have to bear the burden of saving an adult alone, where support would arrive before despair. "It's ambitious," Ethan admitted. "But 30 years ago, survival seemed impossible. Look how far we've come." The campaign went viral. Similar stories from around the world began to emerge. The movement, born from a desperate act by a young boy, was becoming truly global. In the following weeks, international partnerships were formed, governments committed to public policies, organizations offered resources. But amid all the grandeur, Ethan kept his feet on the ground. He continued teaching, now broadcasting his lessons online for educators worldwide, interested in implementing emotional intelligence. One ordinary afternoon after class, a student approached him. "Professor, my dad drinks too much, I'm scared." Ethan took a deep breath. 30 years later, the stories kept coming. But now, there were paths forward. "Let's talk, calmly, and I'll introduce you to people who can help your dad and your family." He walked with the boy, made the necessary referrals, and activated the network. Another family would be embraced before the crisis took full hold. At dinner that night, he shared the news with Emma and Michael Ethan. "We saved another one today," he said simply. "Like you, Daddy?" Michael Ethan asked, already familiar with parts of their family story. "No, son, better than me. That boy didn't have to drag a black bag. He had somewhere to go, someone to talk to." Emma squeezed his hand. "It's your legacy, all of yours." It was true, the legacy wasn't just the foundation, the programs, or the numbers. It was the cultural shift, the understanding that asking for help was strength, not weakness. That children were whole beings, capable of love and transformative action. Ashley, now preparing to retire from her role as executive director of the foundation, spent her days writing a book. Not just her story, but the story of everyone who had turned pain into hope. "Every chapter is a life," she explained to Ethan. "Every page, a lesson in resilience." The book, when published, became required reading in psychology, social work, and education courses, but it was also read by ordinary families, finding reflection and hope in its pages. One letter especially moved Ashley. It was from a 70-year-old man. "I read your book and cried. 40 years ago, my 5-year-old son saved me. I carried shame for decades. Today, inspired by you, I told him how grateful I am. I've never seen my son cry so hard." In each other's arms, we healed old wounds. The cycle of healing expanded beyond what they had imagined. Families separated by stigma reunited. Stories once buried in shame were shared and transformed into strength. Ethan was invited to a special hearing at the UN. The Ethan Protocol would officially be adopted as an international guideline for child protection and family mental health. On the plane to New York, he reread the document: clauses on early identification, judgment-free support, child participation in solutions, and community support networks. Everything they had learned through experience was now becoming global policy. During the ceremony, when asked to speak, Ethan surprised them again. "I accept this honor not in my name, but in the name of every child who, in moments of family despair, chose to act with love. This protocol is theirs, for them, by them." He then projected photos of hundreds of children who had saved family members around the world. The assembly, accustomed to cold political debates, was overcome with emotion. "Implement this not as a bureaucratic obligation," Ethan continued, "but remembering that behind every statistic is a child carrying too much for their age. We can change that." The approval was unanimous. countries committed to deadlines, resources, and goals. The movement, started by a barefoot boy in an American hospital, now had the support of the international community. Back in the United States, the welcome was emotional. The airport was full of families helped by the foundation, children holding signs, adults with tears of gratitude. Michael Ethan, on Emma's shoulders, shouted, "Daddy, Daddy." Ethan lifted him into his arms, feeling the sweet weight of continuity. His son wouldn't carry trauma, but would carry the legacy of transformation. Ashley, watching the scene, allowed herself a moment of deep reflection. The circle had closed in a way she could never have imagined on that dark day decades ago. The implementation of the Ethan Protocol began immediately. Countries adapted it to their realities, but kept the core principles. Reports started coming in. A dramatic reduction in parental suicide attempts, an increase in early help seeking, children being heard and embraced. But it was one specific case that left a profound mark. In India, a 4-year-old girl, Aisha, had sought help at a newly opened center following the protocol. Her mother, recently widowed, was in deep depression. The care was swift and effective. The mother received treatment, the family was welcomed by the community, and Aisha became a local symbol of childhood courage. When Ethan received the video of Aisha saying, "Thank you, Uncle Ethan from America," he broke down in tears. "This is it," he told Emma. "This is exactly it. We saved someone on the other side of the world." The foundation in the United States continued its work, now as a reference and training center. Delegations came not just to learn techniques, but to absorb the spirit of compassion. Jennifer, now the executive director, kept the essence alive. Techniques can be taught. Compassion must be lived. Rachel expanded her efforts by creating the first Healing Hugs Hospital, a mental health center that prioritized human connection as much as medication. "I've learned that sometimes a hug at the right moment is worth more than 1,000 pills," she explained. The model, initially met with skepticism by traditional medical circles, showed impressive results. Combining medical treatment with intensive human care sped up recovery. At 35, Ethan was invited to lead the newly created National Office for Children's Mental Health, established in response to the movement. The decision was tough. It meant less direct contact with children, more bureaucracy, but also the chance to implement systemic change. "Go," Ashley encouraged. "You can help millions instead of hundreds." Emma agreed. "Your purpose was always bigger than one classroom." Ethan accepted, but with conditions. He would still teach once a week and stay connected to the grassroots. "I don't want to become a bureaucrat who forgot why he started," he explained. His first act as director was to establish an advisory council made up of 50% young people who had experienced childhood trauma. Policies about children need to hear from those who were children in crisis, he argued. Initial resistance faded as results spoke for themselves. Policies developed with input from those affected were more effective, more humane, more real. One young advisor, Marcus, son of the father the foundation hadn't been able to save in time years earlier, brought a crucial perspective. "You saved many, but we also need to think about those the system failed. How do we honor them?" Thus, the Hope Memorial was created, where stories of loss were recorded not as failures, but as lessons. "Every life lost teaches us how to save the next," Ethan said at the opening. Michael Ethan, now 5 years old, often accompanied his father to events. His presence reminded everyone of the child Ethan had once been. During a visit to a school, Michael Ethan asked a question that silenced the room. "Daddy, if every child can save someone, why don't some adults let them?" Ethan knelt before his son. "That's the most important question, son. Some adults forget that children are whole people. Our job is to remind them." The wisdom of children passed down through generations. 40 years after the original event, the world had changed significantly. The stigma around mental health had drastically diminished. Children were heard and respected as agents of change. Community support networks were the norm, not the exception. Ethan, now 43, his hair beginning to gray like his mother's, reflected on the journey during a keynote speech at Harvard. "We didn't change the world because we wanted to be heroes. We changed it because we had no choice. Love moved us when fear could have paralyzed us." He showed an old photo, himself at 3 years old in the hospital, the black bag beside him. That child didn't know he was starting a movement. He only knew he loved his mother. Then he showed current photos, institutes around the world, thousands of families gathered, children smiling. Love, when put into action, multiplies exponentially. The audience, made up of academics, politicians, and healthcare professionals, gave a standing ovation. But it was the surprise video message that moved Ethan the most. Ashley appeared on screen, now 71, still vibrant. "Son, you saved me that day. But more importantly, you saved both of us. You turned our worst moment into an eternal purpose. Thank you for never giving up on love." Ethan couldn't hold back his tears. 40 years later, the emotion was still raw. The legacy continued to expand. Inspired by his family's story, Michael Ethan decided at 15 to create an app more sophisticated than his father's. Artificial intelligence trained to recognize signs of crisis in social media posts and offer help. "It's my generation's technology serving your generation's purpose, Dad," he explained. The app, in its testing phase, had already identified and helped hundreds of at-risk youth. Emma developed a training program for therapists specializing in intergenerational trauma. "Healing the individual isn't enough. We need to heal the lineage," she argued. The program revolutionized therapeutic approaches, considering not just personal trauma, but the family patterns that repeated. At an expanded family gathering, now including hundreds of people connected through the Ethan Foundation's journey, Ashley made an announcement. "I'm writing another book, but this one is different. It's about the after, about how to live when the crisis has passed but the memories remain." The book promised to be a guide for the millions who had overcome crises but were still navigating the waters of ongoing recovery. "Because saving is the first step," she explained. "Living fully after being saved is a lifelong journey." Rachel, now coordinating 20 foundation centers, shared an uplifting statistic. "For the first time, we have a second generation of those we helped becoming volunteers. Children we saved 20 years ago are now saving others. The full circle of transformation." Sophie, the girl who had dragged a bag to the center decades earlier, now a chief physician at a hospital, implemented protocols inspired by her experience. "Every hospital must be prepared to receive not just injured bodies but despairing souls," she advocated. Her protocols dramatically reduced suicide attempts among hospitalized patients, creating a holistic healing environment. The movement had transcended mental health, influencing education, public policy, family relationships, and social structures. One quiet evening at home, Ethan watched Michael Ethan help a classmate online with family troubles. "You're not alone," he heard his son say. "There are so many people who can help. My father taught me that there's always hope." Emma approached, hugging Ethan from behind. "Look at what you all have built. An endless chain of love and care." It was true. The 3-year-old boy who dragged a black bag had become a man who changed the world. Not alone, but by awakening the love hidden in thousands of hearts. That night, Ethan dreamed of little 3-year-old Ethan. In the dream, they talked. "Was it worth it?" the little one asked. "Every second," as the grown-up replied. "You were so brave. I just loved Mommy," the little one smiled. "And that love saved the world." Ethan woke up with renewed certainty. The work continued. It always would. As long as there was a child carrying too heavy a burden, as long as there was a family in despair, as long as there was pain waiting to be turned into purpose. But now there was hope made real, love made tangible, comfort guaranteed. The boy with the black bag had won. Not against death, not against despair, but against indifference. He had proven that every gesture matters. Every child has power. Every story can be rewritten. And in hospitals, schools, and homes around the world, the message echoed. You are not alone. You never are. Love always finds a way. Sometimes through the small hands of a brave child dragging more than a black bag, dragging the hope of all humanity. The end of the story. And so ends this moving journey of resilience and love. Now tell me, what did you think of the story and where you're watching from? Do you believe little Ethan made a difference? Share your thoughts in the comments, give it a like, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories.